David Dayen is the executive editor for the American Prospect, and his writing has appeared virtually everywhere writing can appear. David, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you for having me on.
Very glad to have you on. You have a recent article about the high cost of insulin and how some of the plans that are being bandied about in Congress right now, even if they had been passed, would not have helped some people who did desperately need help in this area. Can you give us an overview of what your article concerned?
Yeah, that's right. The story was about H.R. 3, which is a bill that actually passed the House of Representatives today on a party line vote. It is not expected to really go anywhere in the Senate. And there was a lot of, this is a bill that Nancy Pelosi made a priority. They've been working on it all year long. She initially was trying to get a compromise with the Trump administration to pass something that could actually become law. Trump turned on her. Surprise, he's not an honest negotiator. He trashed the bill. It's not likely to pass. Yet all the compromises that were put into the bill to elicit Trump support stayed in the bill, or for the most part anyway, that passed today. And I had a conversation with Nicole Smith Holt and her son, Alec Rayshawn Smith. When he turned 26, he was forced to go off his parents' insurance. And he's a diabetic, was a type 1 diabetic, and could no longer afford insulin when he was uninsured. And he quickly used up all the insulin pens in his house, and he died about 5 days after going off the insurance, tampering with all the insulin pens to get the last bit of insulin out of them. And I asked Nicole Smith Holt, what do you think about this H.R. 3, this drug bill? And she said, well, it wouldn't have helped my son live because the bill sets up a price negotiation system on a certain select number of drugs that Medicare and employer-based patients, people who have employer-based insurance, would get access to those new prices, negotiated prices, but the uninsured would not benefit at all. And so for some reason, there was no effort made to get the uninsured, the most vulnerable people involved in the high cost of prescription drugs, covered by the price negotiation scheme that was set up by H.R. 3.
And just to be clear, in case people might think, okay, well, it seems like there's a gap, but maybe it's a small one. We are talking about millions, potentially tens of millions of Americans would fall into this crack.
Yeah, you're talking about 30 million people.
30 million people.
You're talking about the uninsured.
Yeah. So look, I want. That's just a horrible, horrible story. Should not happen anywhere in the world. Certainly shouldn't happen in a country as rich as ours. And I want to talk to you about some of the potential amendments that were being considered for the bill, some of the other plans. But first, Donald Trump, he does keep saying that this is one of his priorities. The weird drama that's going on between Alex Azar and one of the other aides to the president is apparently over disagreements on how to bring down drug costs. So if this was one area where hypothetically he could have gotten a win, and this bill looks like it moved quite a bit in his direction, why do we believe he turned on Pelosi and the bill at the last minute?
Well, there were a series of meetings between Trump and Greg Walden, who is a ranking member on one of the major committees in the House of Representatives. He's a Republican, and he is in bed with the pharmaceutical industry. And he appears to have had an effect on Trump's thinking on this. Trump has, he said during his campaign that the drug companies get away with murder. He has proposed some ideas like using an international index to set the negotiation price for prescription drugs, and something that's mirrored in H.R. 3, an index of countries that pay lower costs. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, he turned against it, and he's trying to move towards a Republican bill that's being proposed in the Senate, although Mitch McConnell doesn't even like that one. So it's this tension between populism on the right and their still love affair with pro-business interests, like the pharmaceutical industry. So that's what's kind of holding this up. There was one moment where Trump said, an aide to Trump, the aide you were referring to, this guy Grogan, said in a meeting with conservatives, nobody's going to get to Trump's left on prescription drugs. But apparently that's been thrown by the wayside because drug profits are apparently too precious to get rid of.
Yeah, it's a classic case of promises made, promises squirrel. But anyway, so we can't go deep into it, obviously, because I do want to return to this bill and some of the amendments. But the Senate bill that you're talking about there, it looks like it's not going to become law either. But would that bill have helped in the case that you go into in your article?
No, that bill was really focused on seniors, and it had this little bit where prices could not be increased above the rate of inflation in Medicare. And if they were, there would be a rebate that would be given to the government for all excess profits above the rate of inflation. That's really the only major piece of the Senate bill. That part is also in the House bill. And it was actually the source of a lot of tension between Nancy Pelosi and the Progressive Caucus. The Progressive Caucus, Pramila Jayapal, had an amendment saying, okay, if you're doing that for Medicare, why don't you do that for the 150 million people in employer-sponsored insurance and make sure their drug prices also don't raise above the rate of inflation? And for whatever reason, it's kind of complicated, but Pelosi did not want that to happen. And even though Pramila Jayapal got that amendment through one of the committees, the Education and Labor Committee, it was stripped out of the bill. And at one point, it looked like because of that, the Progressive Caucus was going to vote against this bill and tank it, vote down the rule for the bill, which would have had them to go back to the drawing board. There was a last-minute negotiation between Jayapal, Mark Pocan, the other co-chair of the Progressive Caucus, and Pelosi, where she got her amendment back into the bill, along with one other thing, which was increasing the number of drugs that could be negotiated in a given year. Initially, the bill had only 25 per year. It now goes up to 50 in the second year and maintains that number. That's still a small portion of prescription drugs that are out there, but it is double what was initially in the bill. So there were some changes, and actually it's more about the actual revolt itself and the fact that the Progressive Caucus was willing to defy leadership to get concessions out of them, which is a kind of a rare thing in Congress. That was an important moment sort of for the dynamic of the House of Representatives. Ultimately, it's based on a bill that's not going to become law. And even the changes that were made were only about 2 of the 4 that they were requesting, including the one about the uninsured and the insulin patient that I was talking about. That was another demand of the Progressive Caucus that they weren't able to get into H.R. 3 in the final vote.
Now, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, you've got an article that's out right now that you co-authored with Ryan Grimm in The Intercept right now. So they're pushing back against this. What would they like to see happen?
Right. So that was in the context of this fight between the Progressive Caucus and Nancy Pelosi. And Sanders and Warren over the weekend took the Progressive Caucus's side on this. And that was at a moment where it was unclear whether the Progressive Caucus would have the votes to tank the bill. So there was, I mean, this is really about the future of the party as much as anything. Pelosi was very keen to ignore progressive demands on this bill, to sort of dismiss them, to think that she could muscle through whatever she wanted. And it turned out that actually was not the case, that she did have to listen to her left flank on this issue. She didn't give everything, but she did have to give some concessions. And the future of sort of the House of Representatives and how much the progressive left is going to have to be listened to is really what was paramount here. Yeah. And that will be a very important kind of step moving forward. I'm sure it won't be forgotten among the House leadership.
So we only have one more minute, but I'm curious, based on your read of Trump's changing attitude, the Mitch McConnell's lack of interest in even his own side's bill, do you think that it's likely that we will get to the general election with nothing passing in this area?
I think it's quite likely, and drug prices were maybe the #1 issue in 2018 that helped Democrats win the midterms, and it looks like it's going to remain a live issue in 2020, which is a presidential election. And Donald Trump promised his constituents that he would do something about the high cost of prescription drugs. You look at something like insulin, which has tripled in a decade, even though it's a 100-year-old drug.
That's crazy.
This is one where whoever becomes a Democratic nominee certainly will have a place to say, Donald Trump, you betrayed your promise here. You had an opportunity to bring down the cost of prescription drugs. I mean, say what you will about Pelosi's H.R. 3, it would have been an advance in whatever way. Every single Democrat in the House voted for it. So it would have been something, but Trump decided not to go with it. So we're going to hear a lot about this in 2020.
Yeah. And my final advice to Nancy Pelosi would be, if you're going to pass a bill that's not going to get made into law anyway, why not make it a good bill that would actually solve the problem and then campaign based on that?
You're a smart guy.
I try. David Dayen, thank you again for joining us today.
Thanks for watching this free clip of the Young Turks. Don't forget to become a TYT member today. For more exclusive content, join now at tyt.com/join.